Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. This is another SIG CLI meeting. Our event agenda is packed today, so let's get this thing going right away. A quick announcement, feature freeze is on July 31st, from what I just checked. So if you're working on a big feature for 1.11 release, make sure to create an issue in the features repo, and please link that one to the planning notes from a month ago. And then from what I was looking just into the release notes, the code slash will start August 28th. So that gives us about 5-6 weeks of coding till the code slash. With that, let's skip to the test script. Is Menchi on the line?
Yes.
I see Menchi. Can you give us a short update on the test script?
In the past 2 weeks, the test grid is mostly green, but last night there are 2 kube control school tests start to failing. I will ask the SIG testing guys this morning to figure out what's going on. It seems it fails to create the cluster.
Okay. Are there any significant changes with the test coverage update?
I have a PR to increase the coverage in the polymorphism helper package, and will be ready to merge, I guess. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, perfect. Phil will be taking over the next 2 weeks of taking over our looking after our test script. In the meantime, I encourage every single one of you to sign up for the list. I added the additional dates. So it's basically the entire August that is free to sign up. It's fun to be the test on call. You'll learn a lot. And I'm hoping that within the next 2 weeks, we will be able to create a short video how to be a test on call. What are the duties? What are the tools? How to work with them properly. I discussed this topic with Sean a couple weeks ago, and he promised to do a short tutorial. So if you're intimidated by doing this for the first time, don't worry. We will definitely help you to get started. And as always, you can always reach out to us on the SIG CLI Slack and ask for help. We'll be more than happy to help with any questions you might have. Okay, let's then jump to the topics. Antoine, you're the first one with the server-side deploy.
Hi.
Server-side dry run. Sorry.
Yes, one thing at a time.
Yes.
So basically, to give context, we are trying to implement server-side dry run currently in the API machinery SIG. This means that currently in kubectl, when you do dry run, you'll end up creating the request, but the request is not going to be sent to the server. And we're trying to go further by sending a request to the server with some specific parameters. The request is going to be processed, but not persisted. The result is not going to be persisted. The goal is to have a much more significant dry run in the end, because you have the admission chain, some validation, the merge is performed on the server. So you get a much better picture of what would have happened, as opposed to kubectl doing what it knows, which is fairly limited. So we're updating the server, and now we'll have to update the client, kubectl, to maybe use this feature. So I'm suggesting that we replace the current dry run flag to use this server-side dry run feature. As Jordan mentioned, it can be useful if you don't have a server to not talk to the server. So I'm also suggesting, or Juan has been suggesting, thank you very much for this suggestion, by the way, that we use the -- local flag if you don't want to talk to the server. I think that'd be consistent with what we do in general in kubectl. That's it for me.
Okay, so my only question is that local will be always forcing the not talking to the server, and that will ensure the backwards compatibility with users that are expecting dry run not to talk to the server.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so in two versions,
okay,
if you want to do the dry run of today, you would have to do --dry run --local.
Yeah, so we would want to make sure, we would want to capture all of the commands that currently have dry run flags. I think it's primarily ones that do creates, though we should do a sweep. So the first step would be to find out all the current commands that have dry run, and then make sure they all support --local, so that people can start using those together. Then we would need to publicize that at some point in the future, if you don't want to talk to the server, you need to specify --local.
Right.
And then we need to wait the compatibility period. I need to look that up, but for changing behavior on commands.
In the meantime,
and then dry run can be this global flag that also applies to create and update and apply and whatever else. And on commands where it doesn't already exist, then we can start using it the way we want to use it right away, I think.
The way it's done today,
Antoine,
in the meantime,
what's... Go ahead.
You go.
My question is, what is the target release for the server-side dry run? And we could definitely start with, even in 1.12, in the release notes, to mention the distinction between, for the future changes about the local and dry run. To start with, we could start with warnings in all of the commands that are currently using dry run. To mention that in the future release, this change will happen, and if you want to maintain the backwards compatibility, meaning not talking to the server, you should be using dry run with local.
Right. So in the meantime, we're probably going to have this --server dry run, which is going to allow you to test the server dry run. Eventually, the plan is to flip the two. Not flip, but replace the dry run with the server dry run. I think it's sort of too early to, the plan is to have it in 1.12, yes, alpha. But I think it's too early to tell people that we're gonna use a different option.
Well, if we want to encourage them to
announce
start
the change.
Local, that we can. That's why I was saying if we encourage them to start setting --local, if they don't want to talk to the server at all, we should make sure that works in 1.12 and have people announce that they should start doing that. And that gets us in a good place 2 or 3 releases in the future, whenever we want to switch to server side. We have already announced and been telling people they should use --local if they don't want to talk to the server. So that doesn't require any server side changes at all.
Yeah,
it's a no-op, effectively.
Exactly.
Today.
We have, exactly. Yeah, but we are already learning people to use this particular type of future use that we are going towards.
Yeah, it's a good no-op. It's a no-op we want people to be running, because that way when it's not, they won't learn the hard way.
Yeah. And they won't be taken by surprise in, I don't know, 2 releases when we do an actual change to the server side. dry run.
Matt says, where are people being told to do local? Right now, nowhere.
That's what we're discussing. I would expect it to be in the 112 release notes and in every command that currently takes -- dry run. If you specify dry run and don't specify local, you would get a warning that says
Yes.
you should
Exactly.
specify local to avoid talking to the server. In future releases, this will do a server-side dry run. Something
Completely
like that.
fine with that, yeah.
Antoine, the patch commands, do those, when you run those with dry run, do they return the result of the patch?
Yeah, that's the plan. From the server, you mean?
Yeah, so that means,
We're
but
talking about
today
current-
dry run
current
returns
behavior.
the patch itself, right?
It's going to return the merged object when you do
Yeah, we're
it.
not talking about what it returns, what it's going to. We're talking about current behavior. I don't even know that all commands have dry run. Dry run is not a global flag. So
Yeah. I know apply does. Patch might. I think I don't know the answer, but something to follow up on is if we're changing, we might be changing the format of what's returned in dry run, right? Specifically for things that do patches.
Yeah, I think this is fine because patch returns should return the entire object.
It should, but I don't know. We should probably tell people, hey, the output format's changing of this thing. And if
I've already tried to implement this feature, so I've already added the dry run flag everywhere. So I have an idea of where it exists and where it doesn't. I know, for example, kubectl scale doesn't have the dry run, and it could be useful there.
yeah, the bar is lower when we're adding it in new places. If it exists for existing things, and we're talking about changing it from being local to remote, but the output format stays the same, then once we're confident that the server has support for it and we've publicized the need to set -- local for several releases, if that's what people want, then that's okay. If we're talking about changing the output format, that gets trickier. So we just need to enumerate where it exists, what the current behavior is, and make sure we have the ability to do -- local, and whether server side would change the output format. So we can have all this laid out so we understand what we're dealing with.
And I think the main reason we're doing dry run is for apply. And really it's so that we can send a patch and understand, give the result back, right? And
I don't think that's the only reason. I think there are lots of reasons.
That's the only reason I'm staffing it. But I guess we should figure out if users aren't using it directly, like are users using it directly or are they using it through some other command, right? Like in the case of a diff command, for instance, the users aren't specifying the dry run flag directly, right? And in those cases, we have a lot more flexibility and we don't really care how it's exposed on we're not exposing it as a flag to the user, we're exposing it through a command. So like if, for instance, depending on what our needs are, right, or where our focus is, we might not be in any urgent rush to flip over existing dry run commands, right? We might not be getting a lot of end user value out of that. You should figure that out.
The create subcommands that generate static manifests, that's actually where I see dry run used the most by far. Create, config map, foobar, dry run, output YAML, to spit out some YAML locally.
Yeah, but that even server side, I mean, does that do defaulting?
Yeah.
So then maybe that's not even what you want, right? Or maybe it is.
Local, but I mean, Jordan just said they want local. So specifying local is not surprising.
I think in that case, you actually want, I know it depends, right? Like, I guess it depends on the user and maybe you have a different use case in mind, but I imagine if you're doing dry run local to generate config, you don't want the defaults in there because you want
you don't want defaults. You don't want fake UIDs. You don't want the what it looks like to run it through the server chain and get back an object.
Right. So in that case,
chain.
You don't want the server side.
Right. Anyway, I think enumerating what we currently have and what we're proposing, just so we can look at the commands and
I'll try to do that. Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah. Anything that involves sweeping all the commands is a barrel of fun.
Okay. Are there any other questions with regards to the server-side dry run and the distinction between the server-side dry run and the current dry run that we have? Okay, I didn't hear anything else. The next topic is from Huan about improving -- watch for event objects.
Sure. So this was mostly requested by Clayton based on a few use cases that he's run across. But basically, it consists of expanding the current watch functionality, primarily in the get command, to basically add a few more options. So first option could be that we want users to be able to tell watch to only include delete events, for example, for an object being watched. A second option could be to, for example, only watch the changes to an object until that object's deleted. And then a third option could be to watch any creation and change events to a given set of cube resources. So I'll go ahead and make a Google Doc for this to sort of put what is requested in a more concrete manner. But I figure this would be good to begin generating discussion, as to whether we see this being an expansion to the current watch flag or something else entirely. If there's any questions or comments, I'd like to take them up.
Well, the first thing that pops up is that since we are going to add this to our beautiful get command, which is already way too complicated for the functionality it should have, are we going to change the watch just for events, or this is going to be more global, meaning that this will include every single resource that get work with. Additionally, maybe instead of hard coding which specific events are we targeting, maybe adding 2 flags which would say for specifying inclusion or exclusion of the type of actions that we are or are not interested in, and by default always use all of the actions.
Yeah, and so that's also part of the discussion I kind of wanted to generate with this. Basically, how would we, as a user, specify the restrictions we want to place in watch? Is it worth modifying the current flag or making different flags for different, essentially for different cases? And then, yes, would this be restricted to the get command only, or would this be something that would work across any other areas that support watching?
Do we support watching in other commands generically? The only other one that comes to mind is wait.
Yeah, so for wait, as Clayton said in his comment, we could expand wait to include the last use case, which is watch an object before it's created. So
wait until it exists, wait until it's gone. Those seem like pretty natural use cases for wait. More so than part of like get watch.
Yeah, so I guess I could see this being split evenly across wait and get with the watch flag.
I would keep the wait separate from this, since this will be targeted at get. Specifically, get is somehow different from wait. Wait, it has a different functionality, and the semantics of wait are slightly different. There you specify 8 conditions that you are expecting to happen at some point in time. It doesn't matter whether you're waiting for creation, deletion, or something else. Besides, we created the wait command as an experimental, so we can freely modify the current functionality as we wish, assuming that we are improving the user capabilities for using the command. So in that particular case, I would just focus on get. That's I think it's significantly big for one thing.
Okay, so it definitely makes sense to at least begin. I'll begin drafting the proposal with only expanding the watch flag and focus on only filtering the kinds of events that users might want to focus on. So I'll present that at the next SIG CLI meeting.
Yeah, that would be even more because yeah. Let's start with that.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect, thanks. The next on the agenda will be Luke. Luke has a proposal for the plugin manager, and the floor is yours, Luke.
Thank you very much for giving me this spot. So share my screen. I can't share my screen right now.
Yeah, let me stop me.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so I hope you all can see the presentation. I have just a few slides. So what I'm trying to present is Crew. Crew is a kubectl plugin manager, which builds on top of the current existing kubectl plugin system. Why we have done this is we have taken a look at the current plugin system, and we found that even though it existed for a long time, there are not a lot of plugins. It's very difficult to find plugins. It's also, so like you can search GitHub, you can Google for plugins. Yeah, when you find plugins, there's like no streamlined way of installing plugins. There are different approaches. So for example, you can just like curl plugins and then extract them, move it to their location. There is svcat, which bundles an installer, but you still have to install svcat. So there's like no automated and streamlined way of installing plugins. And how we are trying to tackle this problem is by two things: discovery and lifecycle management of plugins. So we want to give developers a platform. So this goes on a discovery. We want to give developers a platform where they can publish their plugins to, and give them like like a simple system. So we call this platform index. This is like where all the definitions of all the plugins lay in. And then on top of that, we can build a search. This is for the user, so they can find plugins, discover plugins, and then move on to lifecycle management. So installation, we download the plugin, we check against the platform if the plugin is compatible. We extract it, we can verify it against the hash, and then move it into its location and try to be atomic doing that. And then we also have upgrades. So whenever we have updates in the platform, so whenever we have updates in the index, we can detect this and then update the current plugin. And to complete the lifecycle, we also have removal. All right. I have a small demo to show you this. So first of all, I have currently no plugins installed. And then we can install Crew. When this goes into Kubernetes, this is optional, but this is the current state. So currently, Crew is managing itself. Crew is a plugin, so the Crew is a plugin, and it's managed by Crew. So we don't need to rely on package managers or anything. It's self-hosted. All right. So now we have installed a few plugins. We have the main plugin, which is Crew, and then we have short commands. You can find, we also indicated that this is part of Crew. All right, so now we can see which plugins are installed. We currently just have Crew installed, and now we can like search for plugins. We can also specify what to search for. The whole search experience is fuzzy. All right, and then we can finally install a plugin. We have decided for CSCert. CSCert is a plugin which basically just shows the current cluster certificate. Oh, and then when we run plugin again, we see that CSCert is finally installed and we can run it. Yeah, so that basically is the whole experience. And when we list all installed crew plugins, we can see that we have CSCert installed, and this is like the current version of the plugin. And then we can also upgrade our plugins. This obviously won't work because we don't have any updates to the index. Yeah, so far that's it. Do you want to see some of the internals, or yeah?
No, I think we're fine to start with.
All right, yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? I have a few, but I'll wait for others first. Okay, I'm not hearing any others, so I'll go ahead with mine. My first and biggest question is something that you also mentioned in your proposal, which means that the crew plugin manager is and will be a problematic with the new plugin mechanism that we are currently working on.
Yeah,
which is supposed to land for 112. How are you planning to address this one? Because honestly,
so it was sorry, yeah. We knew that there will be a new approach to installing plugins, so we designed crew to be not affected by that. So let me show you two slides. So this is currently the plugin spec, and we have no indicator of plugin descriptor files. So when it comes down to installing plugins, we basically have move operations which can move files from the download directory to the installation directory. With the Git approach, we can basically we can still move the files and it can still be installed. So it shouldn't be a big problem.
okay, that's
so
probably
we don't tend to plug in YAML files.
That's probably the biggest issue for me personally, especially that the current plugin mechanism is a big pain from the discussion that I had with several folks during KubeCon itself as well. But if you're able to address the problems of not conflicting the mechanism with the new plugin mechanism that we're hoping to become beta and at some point in time the officially supported plugin mechanism and entirely drop the old mechanism, that's very important. My other question is with regards to searching and discovering the plugins. Currently, there's usually any kind of plugin manager relies on some kind of a central repo where it can get the plugins where it should be looking for the plugins. How this is handled by the crew?
Yeah, currently we have, so the index itself is a Git repository, and it just contains a bunch of those plugin files I just showed. So basically Kubernetes objects. We don't support different plugin repositories yet, but if there's a need to do that, we can implement it.
Yeah, I imagine that would be like something that we want one of the first requests, because like for instance, different cloud, like we don't want the main repository of plugins to have like maybe cloud provider specific plugins potentially, right? Or I mean, maybe we do, but maybe we don't, or there's very specific plugins for niche areas. And but folks will want to provide those plugins, and so we want a way of plugging those together.
Well,
Yeah.
to start with, we don't have anything such as a central kubectl plugins repo to start with. And I'm not sure that we want to be in the business of maintaining one. So definitely having a configurable list of plugin index, whatever you want to call it, plugin repo index is definitely a must for this, because this will, aside from moving the responsibility for maintaining such a repo from us to some other folks, this will also allow vendors to, as Phil said, to provide their own specific implementation that will be targeting their particular functionality, which will be different for Google, different for Amazon, or any other cloud provider, or any other type of functionality.
So if I understand this right, you're saying that you could have the same plugin name from two providers doing two different implementations?
That's probably a different topic that that I haven't figured out yet. There might be some problems with the plugin manager that that's one of the reasons that I was somehow trying not to go into the business of managing plugins beforehand, and I've mentioned that several weeks ago, that when we try to solve this problem, there will be issues with several plugins of the same name. Honestly, I'm not sure what would be the best solution. You might prepend some kind of a repo alias to the plugins from installation point of view. It should be pretty easy, but I think the biggest issue might be when it comes to usability, because how should you be able to discover that they're both under the same name? Which one the user should be using? Should we allow the user to set a alias for plugins of the same name, or should we enforce the alias for them based on the repo that he's using for the same plugin name? It's a hard topic, definitely.
Doesn't Unix have that problem?
There are two kind of aspects. Go ahead. What?
I was just gonna say, like, the naming collision problem,
What's the
like
question?
that's gonna be a problem, right? Like Linux has the same problem, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's the plugins think of
Jordan, you're breaking up a little bit.
Right? Like their IU.
Is anyone else having trouble hearing Jordan?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you were
Same
hard to
here.
understand that sentence.
Yeah. Is that any better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if like there's the way a plugin thinks of itself internally, right? Like it's ID or something. And if you have a registry, then that the plugins would be in the registry by ID. And you can do same things like it has to be a reverse DNS name you control. So like Amazon.com or Google.com or foobar.com or whatever. But then there's like the actual commands they expose and the way the user interacts with it. And it's totally reasonable for plugins from different providers to want to make use of kind of the same user-friendly, intuitive names like login or setup or whatever the commands are. And so I think we need to be really careful to treat those things distinctly and allow for plugins from multiple providers to want to contribute those same user-friendly names and make it really, anytime you're part of it, like a plugin manager or registry or something, is making it clear, like, this is the AWS plugin or the Google Cloud plugin, and it wants to contribute a login command, or whatever. And then letting the user pull that in and letting the user have control over how it surfaces within their environment. And so if the user wants to interact with AWS and Google Cloud, they can pull down both of those plugins, but then say, actually, I want to call this one AWS login and that one Google login. So like the part of the power of the simplicity of the model where the plugin is just a command you run, a user can rename it, right? And it can have some set of names that it wants to contribute, but the control is ultimately the user's.
Yeah, I would say keep things on the simpler side so that people can distribute it via Git, via object storage, via whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
Just to make it simple. I mean, even for your own CI system, you might want to take a pinned version, stick it in object storage because it's a lot faster to grab every time, or however you want to do things.
Yeah.
To do stuff like that, to have that control.
And even the registries, if the registry format is basically here's a JSON blob that is a list of descriptors and URLs that you can grab the artifact at. Like the simpler the better. And if the thing that kube control ultimately consumes, which is what I think we're trying to get to, like with the new model, is just a really simple, like, look for a binary with this name or an executable with this name.
Yeah, I think the more complicated piece in this is cross-platform capability of how do people build plugins that can work in a cross-platform manner. We already have a problem where we're very, very Linux heavy, but we also have to do with Mac, and we have to deal with, and there you might write it as a shell script, right, to get those environments. But what happens when you bring in something like Windows, which half of developers use and lots of Kubernetes folks do it? So then now you can't use shell commands anymore. How do we deal with that from a plugin standpoint?
Also, I find
Lucas,
shell
an answer to
scripts
that.
typically don't work
Excuse me,
cross-Mac.
Lucas, an answer to that.
Yeah. Okay. So what we've done, we allowed different platforms for one plugin as target platforms. So we have a list of platforms, and those can be matched against the platform you want to install to with simple Kubernetes label selectors. So whenever you're on the platform, Mac OS or Linux, this will install from this location and will use those move semantics to move the files, and the lower one is for the Windows platforms. Currently, we support as keys, key value pairs. We support the Go OS and Go Arch values. All right. So this is like the current approach that we've taken. We try to make it flexible. So whenever there's a need of different platforms, different architectures, we can address it.
The platforms is perfect, and I totally agree. It's reasonable, but we still will have to solve the problem of the name uniqueness and solving that as Jordan proposed. And I think that's probably the easiest solution, to let the user decide the name or rename the plugin per his or hers own requirements or own will.
So to add a quick note to renaming plugins. So under the new proposed mechanism, which we'll hopefully have a prototype public soon, basically the name of the plugin, as is currently being considered, will essentially determine what command tree path the plugin targets. So for example, if you have a plugin called kubectl-foo-bar, then that plugin will provide essentially a command under kube control /foo /bar.
Yeah. Yes.
So I have something to add.
Okay.
Actually, I think I'm gonna voice the unpopular opinion here. I think whatever plugin manager ships with kubectl or independently as it is today, I think it should come with a central repository out of the box. And the reason I say this is because I've been developing some plugins myself. I have about, I think, 7 or 8 plugins right now. And if people go ahead and, you know, tap into, I don't know, Google plugin repo or Red Hat Linux plugin repo, then this kind of gives no opportunity for indie plugins to be discovered. And the lack of a, let's say, you know, blessed default repository kind of prevents that. The beauty of plugin managers like in apt-get or Brew is that there's a blessed manager and then it works out of the box. And then, you know, you have the discovery mechanism there. Otherwise, we're gonna be going back to the GitHub world. You know, people will dig up plugins from GitHub and then try using them. So one thing that a central repo is basically solving is that you have plugins in a global, you know, repo. But then again, I appreciate the concerns regarding, you know, this happened in the Docker images. So do we want to repeat this mistake again?
Yeah, I think my main concerns would be like land rush. If there's an official central repo, you have a land rush for preferred names. And then also, like you talked about, like a blessed or curated set, like who is blessing and who is curating, and what are the statements being made about things in that central repo? Like, have those been vetted? Are they going to steal your credentials? Are they going to, you know, like who is responsible, I guess, for maintaining that?
Yeah, I mean, you get into the whole world of operating a central repository and everything that goes along with it, which is a non-small amount of work for somebody to take on. Not so much running it, but all of the logistics of to give people the ability to delete things. If not, how do they then version things in it? How do you deal with a security report on one of these things? Do you take it down? How do you you know, what do you do? How do you run, you know, your terms and conditions? You know, you're running a public service, all the operational things, and you end up going down a long path. I'll tell you what Helm's doing, because Helm is a package manager and kind of has to deal with the same thing with charts. And we're looking at actually switching to a distributed search. So you've got something that's distributed, but people can register them. If you're not familiar, there's something called Packagist. It's the PHP repository for finding packages. I'll drop in a URL. What's neat about this is only a metadata. All of the content, everything about it is distributed. If you search for something in there like HTML or something, it's going to point you to a third-party location to get it. It presents metadata to help you figure it out, even has some niceties about tying with GitHub to show you stars and things like that. But at the end of the day, it's really just a distributed search targeted at PHP packages, and it knows how to find them. And so that may be an easier way, because then you don't have the onus on it. Yet folks can distribute them initially, and then later on, if you want to layer in a search to make it easier, that could be a possibility too. You know, because at the end of the day, we all have to deal with private repositories where we've got our own company-specific plugins and things of that nature. So everything can't be public. So how do we deal with maybe doing a little public, a little easy search, but yet allowing for distributed setup, because we are in a distributed world?
Yeah, I agree. So I agree. This definitely it wouldn't solve, but it would alleviate the land rush situation. It also alleviate who maintains and curates the central repository, since it's distributed. And I'd say it also makes it very simple for plugin authors to register their plugins. You know, with a repo. If all that, you know, registering a plugin consists of is providing some metadata of where to obtain the plugin files.
Okay. Are there any other topics, questions, suggestions with regard to the plugin manager? I think that's a big topic that we will have, we'll continue having on over the next couple of weeks, probably a couple of months. Okay, Antoine, server-side apply, finally.
Hey, I'm
It's
back.
your turn.
So this is just a quick announcement that we have a sort of pre-alpha version of the server-side apply ready in the branch. So we're implementing the server-side apply, which is sort of similar to what we have in kubectl, but on the server. We're implementing this in a branch in the Kubernetes repo. And we have sort of a alpha version right now that is ready. For the kubectl specific part, we have a new flag in kubectl apply that allows you to target the new endpoint available on the server. And if the server doesn't support this endpoint, we fall back onto the existing apply. You can create objects. I mean, I want to focus on the CLI part of this, but we have some sort of thing working. Don't expect a demo. I've been too lazy to prepare a demo. But I'll send an email with the various features that are working today. And happy to talk about that. Mostly, I want to give an update on the status of this feature.
Okay. How about a demo for the next SIG CLI meeting?
I'll try to find the time.
Perfect. That would be awesome. Like
Yeah,
a 5-minute demo. We've been talking, like you've been talking about the server-side apply for a couple months already, and being able to see that in action would be pretty awesome, I think, for all of us. So if you could find a couple minutes and do a short demo, one example of how this works, with a short summary, what is currently possible, what are the future goals, that would be very appreciated.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I think the next topic, we will move it to the next meeting because Philip just said that he had to drop off, and it also is somehow related to the topic that I had, which is column printing for CRDs. So before we drop off, does anyone want to give us any updates on their work, on changes, or what they're currently working on? Okay, hearing none. Thank you very much for your time, and see you all in 2 weeks. Bye, folks.
Thanks. Bye.